How many people are here? Hang on.
I am.
250, really?
Yeah, this is a 250.
This is the biggest Basecamp ever. This is fantastic. Holy mackerel. That was way easier than counting. Who's this person over here? Does anybody know this person? John, you got to put your hat on because otherwise we're not going to know you. Oh, you put it. It doesn't matter. Your hair is not all that. It's nothing to worry. Come out here for a second. We're going to kick this off. John is actually going to give the first presentation, but I'm going to introduce him by telling a little bit of a story, actually. John and I were classmates in architecture school down in Texas, and this was 2002 or 3, and I hadn't seen SketchUp yet. It was SketchUp version 1 or 2, something like that at the time. And I knew John because he was another Mac user, and I was a Mac user, and we kind of were friends and stuff. And I remember walking past, everybody has a first time I saw SketchUp story, right? So this is mine. I remember walking past John's desk, and John was doing this project on Archigram, and so he had this kind of walking city Zeppelin blimp thing up on his screen, and it looked like an Illustrator drawing. And I thought, that's an Illustrator drawing. And I was just walking by, corner of your eye, like that, right? And then he orbited. Just a little bit like that. And like my pants fell off. It was like, what? Oh my God. And then poor John, for the next week and a half, this is the absolute truth, every 20 minutes I would come up to him when he was in the studio. I'd be like, John, can you tell me how to...
It's been the story of my life ever since.
Exactly. And so it's been exactly like that ever since. John is one of my absolute best friends here. He's the product manager for SketchUp, has been since we were acquired by Google, and has been the product designer for SketchUp since well before that. When did you start?
Version 2.
Version 2. How many people were using SketchUp in version 2? That's the crowd. Excellent. Cool. What? Why is it echoing? Oh, because it's both of us.
Oh.
Like that. All right. So I would like to give a big hand. I'd like you to give a big hand for John Backus, our product manager.
Thanks, Aiden.
Cool.
Do I still have to wear the hat? Do I look good in the hat? I'm going to put it up to the audience. Hat on or hat off? Believe me, nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants to see that. Thanks for coming, everybody. This is fantastic. This is my third 3D Basecamp. How many people were here at the last Basecamp in 2008 in Mountain View? Great. Welcome back. And how many people were at the first Basecamp? Great. Welcome back. How many of those of you who are at the first Basecamp live in Boulder? Okay, so that's not a bad sign. So thanks for traveling for all of these great distances to get here, and I'm curious who came the farthest. I know that, yes, we're Australia. I mean, that trumps everything, right? Yeah, that trumps everything. Okay, so we have some people from where else?
I saw somebody look like they came from the moon.
Jorge's here from Peru. Welcome, Jorge. Scotland. We've got somebody from Ireland, too. How many Irish people do we have here? Yeah? Excellent. Oh, I have some slides. So I promise this will be, I'm sorry, I have slides, and that's kind of against the principle of this thing, but let's kind of talk for a bit. So rather than how far you came, let's find out what kind of people you are. So how many of you would say you're a SketchUp expert? Don't be shy. How many of you that don't have your hands up, somebody would say about you, yes, you are a SketchUp expert? Okay, that's better, right? Yeah, I get it. Okay. Ruby scripters. How many of you have written a Ruby script? Yes, thank you. Awesome. How many of you are selling a Ruby script? Very good. Okay. Todd, Pate, yes. Everybody, right? Okay. Okay, how many of you are SketchUp sages? These are the people who are our super moderators in our user forums. Hands up. Hi. Don't be shy. Come on. We know who you are. Great. You guys are awesome. Thanks so much. Gaius, raise your hand. Gaius, man. You know, it's really hard for guys like me and Jody and Tommy and Vicky and the other people that post into our forums to actually beat you to answer a question. So, man, you make us look bad. We should talk later. Okay, supermodelers. How many supermodelers do we have here? Jorge, you can put your hand up. That counts. Yeah, right. Great. Thanks for coming. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of great conversations about the work that you guys are doing, and I look forward to that over the next few days. Sketchucation. How many of you are members of the Sketchucation forums? Look at that. Excellent. Welcome. Thank you. If I wasn't wearing this hat, I'd be wearing your hat. I was wearing it. It was a great hat. Thank you. I'm sorry I missed the party last night, but we'll drink beer. What's that? Okay, very good. How many of you are members of our ATC program, our authorized trainers and such? Great, thanks. So the point I'm trying to make here, how many distributors, resellers, people who are selling SketchUp Pro? Great. Thank you. All right. How many of you here have a product or plugin that's built on SketchUp's API or using SketchUp's SDK that you're selling? Look at that. Thank you. So you guys are great. I mean, I don't think we had any idea that the sort of diversity of usage that we would find in SketchUp back so many years ago when we first made this thing. It's surprising and kind of amazing. And you may have seen us say this number in other places before. We've kind of been talking about it a little bit, but there are 1 million people using SketchUp every week. 1 million unique individual people using SketchUp to do something, whatever. I mean, we know what some of you are doing, obviously, but what's that? Using or downloading the new? No, using it. So this means unique people started the SketchUp program and did something in it per week. How did you know? No personally identifiable information is ever moved across the wires, but yeah. No, I mean, it's worth saying that every time SketchUp starts, it sends a ping to a server that just says, hey, I'm alive. That's it. And it's a really important thing for us so that we know how many people are using the product. It gives us a sense of how important the work that we're doing is and, you know, kind of what we should do with it next. We really don't know anything else about you. It's just a very abstract piece of data. Honestly, we don't. And if we did, I'm not the guy to ask about it. I just know the 3D modeling stuff. But it's a very big deal for us. And, you know, I think, Joe, are you here? Can I embarrass you, Joe? Raise your hand, Joe. Stand up, Joe. So, Joe doesn't want to stand up. Okay, there he is. Yay. So, Joe, how many users did you think we would have for SketchUp back when? Do you guys know who Joe is? Joe was the guy who built the original prototype that became SketchUp. He is the, what term do you prefer? The godfather of SketchUp? Yeah. So thanks, Joe. How many people did you think would be using SketchUp 10 years down the line? Well, okay. So there you go. We're underperforming, but you know we're working on it. Okay. All right. So. I just thought, you know, some of you may have seen us refer to this event as a 10th birthday party for SketchUp, and I thought it might be fun to just kind of look back in a simple way at where we've been. So all the way at the left, 2000, all the way to the right, 2011. We've been going for about 10 years now. The first, actually, I've lost the date for the very first commercial build of SketchUp. Tommy, do you know? Joe? Somewhere around in 2000. We have the first build on a floppy disk that's actually from like December 31st of 1999. Does that sound right? Yep. So let's call that SketchUp 1. SketchUp 1.3, we actually had a bunch of little 1 dot something releases every 6 hours or something for a while. And then SketchUp 2 in 2002, SketchUp 3 in 03, 4 in 04. It's kind of a pattern for a little while. 5 in 05. Then the dotted line there is when, and I'm going to introduce John in just a second, we were acquired by Google and we became a Google company, a Google team. 6 came out just over the line in 2007, but we had a lot of stuff that we were working on. All new infrastructure for managing our code and all that kind of great stuff. 7 in 2008, 7.1 in 2009. Just for the record, that's where I started. Right there, 2002. I think the first thing that I worked on was sections, I think. Yeah. This is about where we hit our 1 million user mark, which was pretty exciting. And, we're working on it, Joe. Come on, give us a break. Okay. And it's been about 10 years, so we're still cooking along. And honestly, we couldn't do this if there weren't very excited, very engaged people like all of you that, thought SketchUp was worth spending some time with. So, really, we're very grateful to all of you for doing that. So, what are we going to do here today? As many of you know, thanks. Many of you have probably already seen some little pieces of this launch dripping and dribbling up onto the web. It takes us a while to get all of the parts moving in unison, but as of right now, we are formally announcing the launch of SketchUp 8. We've been staying up late. Andrew, how late were you up last night?
Last night was okay, but the night before that was 20 hours.
20 hours. All right. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into these launches. How many? I'd actually like to take a break for a second and say, okay, here it is. Here's SketchUp 8. Woohoo, looks exactly like SketchUp 7, right? Except I would like to introduce you to our new scale figure. This is Susan. Susan, are you here? Can I embarrass you? Susan is right here. Yep. Susan, I think, am I right, employee number 2? Yeah, so Susan has been with us for an awfully long time, and I was trying to prepare a list of features that Susan worked on so you could all say, oh yeah, sure, I like that. And so Susan's done great work for me. And the truth is, I don't think I could pick any one particular thing. It was kind of like there's nothing Susan hasn't touched at some point or another through the course of this product's life. So anyway, we thought it was time to have somebody new. Every release we like to do somebody new. So Susan is the new Sang, who was the new Bryce. Is Sang here? Bryce, stand up. Bryce, yeah. Anyway, so that's Susan. And I thought this might be an opportunity to, how many SketchUp folks do we have here in the audience? Can you stand up? Raise your hands. Everybody, come on, you work on SketchUp. All right, great. So this is the, so this is the group that stays up late and works weekends to make this stuff happen. And it really is a labor of love for us, certainly for me. I'm sure, if you've been up for 20 hours, you'd much rather be working on something else right now. But it really has been a great, fun thing for us all to work on. And I should also say that not everybody is here. There are people back in the office still making sure that, the web servers don't fall over and all that kind of stuff, which is really embarrassing. So, SketchUp 8. How many of you have actually downloaded SketchUp 8 already? Yeah. How many of you downloaded it last night? Yeah, okay. I think I've seen my first crack of SketchUp 8 already posted. Oh, we're dispatching the ICBMs at this moment. Yeah. Don't download those. They're not real sometimes, or I hope they're not. Okay, so let's just get into what's in the release. And we really want to talk a lot about that this afternoon. And then we're going to give everybody a chance to kind of try it out a little later. So the first thing I want to talk about is what we're going to call modeling in context. And to help me talk about that, I would like to introduce our fearless leader from Mountain View, John Hankey, who is the vice president at Google of Maps, Earth, SketchUp, the whole panoply, is that the right word? Of geo things. And John is going to say a few words about stuff.
Something. I don't know. Okay. Thank you, John. You know, John, I've been involved with you guys for a number of years now, and the very first time I came out to Boulder to visit with SketchUp, our relationship went somewhere that I would have one of the SketchUp people, and it still hasn't happened, so I'm still kind of waiting for that.
Get in to take a picture of you. SketchUp 9.
I'm thrilled to be here with you guys. You're really the elite of the SketchUp community. It was mentioned this was the largest SketchUp Basecamp ever, 250 people. It could be a lot bigger. It could be a lot bigger if we had an infinite amount of money and we could pay for thousands of people to come. We can't. I'm personally thrilled that we're investing in this and we have this, but it's a very select set of people that you guys are to be here. The number of people, many times this number of people would like to be here. I'm glad to spend a little bit of time with you. John asked me to talk about geomodeling and kind of where we came from, why we ended up here, why we're doing this. And I thought I would just kind of recount that story a little bit. And also to say that I'm super excited about SketchUp 8. I really came out here just to kind of party with these guys and celebrate the release, because there are a number of things in this release that I personally have been waiting years for us to do, and I think it's awesome. It's got a lot of great stuff in it for geomodeling. So why is Google involved with SketchUp? Why do we care about geomodeling? How did this all come to be? I guess the story began from my side, when we started a little company called Keyhole about 10 years ago, with the goal, the kind of absurd goal for a company when there were 4 of us, of creating a satellite imagery 3D virtual globe of the entire Earth. It was a pretty grandiose vision for people kind of sitting around thinking about what we wanted to do. But we thought, well, someday it might be possible. And a lot of the technologies we needed were sort of starting to come together. So we started that company. And we made some progress. I mean, we made the kind of progress you make if you're a startup. We got up to 30 people. We raised a few $1 million in venture capital. And we kind of got things untracked. But we didn't really get started until we were acquired by Google in 2004. And Larry and Sergey and Eric really bought into this vision that geographic information, that maps, that building this virtual model of the real world would be incredibly valuable. That it would be a tool that people could use to find things that they were interested in. And fundamentally, that's why Google invests in maps. That's why we invest in Earth. And that's why there's this geo angle to SketchUp, is we want to create this virtual substrate of the entire world. We want to make it as accurate as we possibly can. We want to put it out on iPhones and iPads and PCs and let people use that to explore the world around them and find useful information, to do all kinds of mundane things like get to their business meetings faster, to find interesting places to go out and eat with their family, to plan cool vacations to Hawaii, all those kinds of normal things that people do. And some of the crazy things that people do with a product, like preserve Amazonian rainforests and fly rescue helicopters into New Orleans to pull people off of rooftops after hurricanes and things like that. So Google bought us, and so we kind of had the beginnings of something. But Larry and Sergey said, well, what do you guys need to really realize your vision? You know, what would you like to invest in to really make this thing all that it could be? And some of us had become acquainted with SketchUp. And it was actually kind of through the SketchUp community and community building efforts that I first became acquainted with SketchUp. I first got to know about SketchUp through the newsletter, which we still send out the SketchUp newsletter. This kind of quirky, kind of unique take on what's going on. This company had this kind of weird personality, which I really liked. And it was the first 3D modeling tool that I could actually use. And I had worked in the video game industry before, and I tried all of the usual suspects. I couldn't really use any of those tools, but I could sort of use SketchUp. So that was immediately exciting. We knew that if we wanted to model the physical world in any kind of detail, it would have to be done with tools that users could use to help us do that. That Google would never be able to do that on its own. So we convinced Larry and Sergey, and I guess that's the reason I'm here today is I had a hand in convincing the company that it was a good idea to buy SketchUp and invest in this company and invest in this tool. And in particular to invest in the geomodeling side of it, to make SketchUp an even better tool for modeling the real world, or the built world, as the architectural wonks and like John like to call it. And so we did that. And we sat down at that time, and that was in, I guess, 2006, and thought about, well, what could we do that would make like the most awesome tool that you could imagine for users to use to model the real world? And we talked about things like being able to pull in the imagery from Google servers, which happened pretty quickly, with hacky in the beginning, but more and more elegant over time. But we also imagined, user photographs, like somebody could just go around and take a bunch of photographs, and that those could sort of come into the modeling environment easily. We were even then thinking about Google Street View and that kind of thing. If you had Street View imagery, would that be helpful? And could you somehow bring that in? And could you make all of this a lot more automated, so it wasn't this really tedious process of having to align images and clip textures and attach them in just the right way to the geometry, but could the images actually help you model the real world and at the same time bring those textures into the model to make it nice and rich and detailed? And in the years since, lots more SketchUp users. The number that John mentioned, 1 million users a week, is that right?
Uniques a week, yeah.
Is actually really important for us. It is an anonymous number, but it helps us feel good about investing in this product, because we do sell a pro version, but we're giving the product away to lots and lots of people. So it's really important for us to know how many people are using it, and we want more and more people to use it. These guys did Warehouse, which is an incredible tool for sharing models, and that was a great sort of step forward. But I think the full realization, or maybe I wouldn't say the full realization, because there's always more that we can do, but a huge step forward are the enhancements that are in SketchUp 8 in geomodeling. And I haven't seen the final version of some of these features. I've heard people talk about them for years, and I've been promised that they're almost coming for months, and I've seen bits and pieces, but I'm going to see my first full-blown demo of what the product can do today. So that's why I'm here, and I'm super grateful to all of you for being SketchUp users and for participating in educational programs and forums and being super modelers, and I look forward to meeting more of you while I'm here. But I'm going to sit down, and I'm eager to see this product. So hopefully we'll see the demo. Finally.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Hope this works. Okay, so here's how the rest of this is going to go. I'm going to do a quick little kind of lightning pass through the high points of what's in the release, and then I'm going to turn it over to 3 of my colleagues, Scott, Bryce, what's your name? Aiden, yeah. And they're going to actually do a live demo. I hope this works. And then we'll break up from there. So, okay, the geomodeling features. So this is kind of, how many, I guess you've all kind of seen some of the 3D cities in Google Earth by now, right? Yeah, okay. So the fundamental thing about a SketchUp model when you're doing geomodeling is that the model exists on a site. So show of hands, architects in the room? Yeah, okay, so a few. When you were a student, no doubt you were drilled on this concept. Architecture doesn't exist. It doesn't, with few exceptions, doesn't float in the air. It always sits on the ground somehow, somewhere. The site is important. The site matters. The site informs the building, all of that. So site, which in geomodeling terms is what we would call the location or the geolocation, is the first thing we have to think about. So in SketchUp 8, we've done some things to make it easier to say where your model exists on Earth. Fundamental thing. We've taken the old way that the kind of hacky way that we were doing that by, you had to have Google Earth running, and then we had this weird call through a COM interface that kind of went in a semi-public backdoor, and it mostly worked. We've replaced that with an entirely new feature called Add Location. And what Add Location does is it just puts a dialog up on the screen in SketchUp, pours content from the Google Maps API into that dialog, You can browse around in the world to find the location that you want to model, hit a button, and it pulls it into SketchUp. In SketchUp 7, you also got a terrain model along with that imagery. It was fairly low resolution, right? Also, it turns out it was kind of an interpretation of an interpretation of an interpreted version of somebody's interpretation of the terrain. We kind of erased a few of those steps and made it pretty much a straight shot to Google's terrain servers. We get very high quality, very high resolution terrain data out now. And in some parts of the world, I mean, you know, the quality of the data, just like everything else in Google's Google Maps, it varies. But there are some parts of the world where we have incredible detail in terrain. Like if you were to look at the anchorage for the Golden Gate Bridge, for example, I think, John, was it 6-inch? Something like that? Super small. In fact, you can wipe out SketchUp by importing too much of it. So, you know, careful. Also, this was a very, very common request in our user forums, in the product ideas series we ran last fall, all over the place. People wanted color imagery from Google Earth. In SketchUp 8, you can have that. That imagery is available to you at basically the maximum resolution that we serve through the Maps API. So that means you can be very, very precise as you're putting things on the map. Okay, how many of you have used Building Maker? Building Maker users? Okay, who's never heard of Building Maker? Great, okay, we're doing well. So this is Building Maker. Building Maker is a new geomodeling tool that we launched, several months ago now. Yeah, and it models in a kind of different way from SketchUp. It starts from high quality matched oblique photography that Google is collecting around the world. You just drag boxes in, primitives basically, and match points in the photograph and a couple of photographs, and then it sort of auto-magically figures out what the building is and applies photo textures to it. It's pretty awesome. Anybody notice anything different about this dialogue by any chance? Upper right corner? New button. No? Okay. So we now can run Building Maker directly inside of SketchUp, and we have a straight pipeline from the Building Maker model into the SketchUp model. Any Building Maker model that you create can be auto-magically converted into a SketchUp model. The button I'm pointing out says SketchUp Export. And we can actually inject that model directly into your active SketchUp model, or you can open it up separately, and we'll go through all of that stuff in a minute. But the purpose of that is basically you can take the rough primitive model that you've created in Building Maker, and you can add a lot of detail to it. So, you know, the elevator core over on the left-hand side of this building and the funky tilted parapet at the top of it, those things would be quite difficult to model in Building Maker. In SketchUp, super easy, and many of you already know the tools. So we'll run through that in some more detail in a minute. Another cool thing about this is that, you know, not only can one Building Maker model go into SketchUp, but actually any Building Maker model can go into SketchUp. So you can now start to leverage the power of the community of modelers that are all working together to build, you know, a consistent model of urban fabric wherever in the world. And we'll talk about that in more detail. And there are many of you that may just want to use that for site context when you're working on a design project. And I think that's a great thing to do with it, you know. Like I said at the beginning, no building, every architect knows this, no building exists in a vacuum. Every building has a site. It matters what that site is. So we can actually now do some things to bring that right into your SketchUp model. Okay, so to recap, add location, you get awesome color imagery, high quality terrain. That's kind of a flat site. Sorry, bogus, but that's where we are right now. The little round, anyway. From the 3D warehouse, you can use the feature that's called nearby models. That will run a geospatial query on the 3D warehouse, return any user-generated building model that exists within the confines of the site that you've established. You're free to use all of those for your project. Add new building. This is what we're calling Building Maker in SketchUp. You can use that to fill in any missing details around the site. Of course, in SketchUp 7.1, how many of you are 7.1 users? Okay. We introduced a feature that was called photo textures, where we streamed data directly from Google's Street View imagery into SketchUp as well, so you can use that to get higher quality texture maps for any building facade. Of course, SketchUp tools are all still there as well, and they're all just as useful as they've been forever. And I think, who can name that building? Where are the architecture nerds? Ah, awesome. Awesome, yes.
Repeat it?
This is Totlin's, wait, what's the name of the building?
I don't remember.
Oh, you don't remember? It was an unbuilt project. It's not really across the street from our office. Although I think Aiden would like to see it there. I'd probably support that too. And then, of course, you can still take your project, export it to Google Earth, and view it directly in the context of this, this endless, scrollable, spatial fabric that is, Google Earth. It's fantastic. So this package of tools, some of them, the Street View stuff, we've done that in a previous release. The going to Google Earth, we've done that in a previous release. Some of these things are new, some are old, but this is really the first time that I think we've got a comprehensive package of tools that are all available, and you can use all of them today to make great models of cities, great models of buildings that you're working on, whatever. So that's our geomodeling features. Next set that I want to talk about, we have a new set of modeling tools that we're calling the solid tools. Bryce is going to be talking about those in more detail in a second, but for the most part, they're available only to SketchUp Pro users. They're a bit more complicated to use. There's only one of them that we think is particularly relevant to working with building maker models, and I'm not sure, Scott, are you going to talk about that? Okay, so we'll talk about that in more detail in a second. But here's the basic thing to start from. What's the difference between a solid model and your average SketchUp model? Is there anybody here who does 3D printing? Martin is here. Lewis is here. Some people. Okay. So 3D printing is very hard to do from SketchUp models. I know that there are often people who want to do that, and they usually manifest themselves by asking for an STL export, which we could totally do, but that's not the problem. The problem is this difference between solid and not solid. So this object to the left, solid. It's completely enclosed. It's completely, if you filled it up with water, the water wouldn't pour out, okay? So we're in SketchUp 8, we're calling those kinds of objects solids. If you were to, say, erase the top face, wait for it, not solid, now that is not a solid. So we also support that kind of geometry as well, and obviously that's what most things that you model in SketchUp are like. Okay. So we'll talk about this in more detail in a minute. There's one other great property of judging something to be a solid in SketchUp. Can anybody see it? So we can actually give you an accurate volume for objects in SketchUp that are judged to be solid. And thank you. For the Ruby scripters in the room, there are two new things that have been added to the Ruby API that are relevant to this that you may find useful. The first one is you can get the volume for any object which is judged to be a solid. And the second is that there's a very, very inexpensive, computationally inexpensive manifold test that's now available to you. And I think that there are probably dozens of ways that you guys will come up, things that you'll come up with that will benefit from having that. I know I've talked to several folks that are writing 3D printer drivers, love this. Some of our energy modeling folks seem interested. Anyway, so that's new. And that's kind of the nutshell version of the solid tools. There they are. Let's do them in detail, and we'll do this quick. You're probably going to recognize most of these. Union takes two objects. Whoops, too fast. Takes two objects and blends them together, merges them together. Intersect just gives you the place where they overlap, the intersection of the two objects. Subtract, what does subtract do? Subtracts. This story tells itself, right? Trim, like a subtract, only it doesn't remove the part that's subtracted. So this is really handy for doing joinery and stuff like that in for woodworking. There's the two pieces. And split, the last one, basically finds the intersection and then saves all the bits. This bit, the top bit, the first bit, second bit, the bit in the middle. Okay, all right. I think this is pretty clear, right? So most of you may know these tools as Boolean operations, Boolean tools. We thought that was a little bit nerdy word, so forgive us. There they go. Okay. Last section, we've added a few things to layout. How many layout users do we have here? Wow, awesome. Awesome, okay. And I won't spend a ton of time with this. The really interesting thing that happened with our last release, 7.1, we added kind of just one feature, which was linear dimensioning. And all of a sudden, people started sending us things that look like this. And we thought, but that's not what we wanted to do. So anyway, so we've added a few things that we think are relevant to that kind of drawing. And they're subtle. Some of them are subtle. Precise move. Everybody asked for a way to line up a plan and an elevation. Snap points together. Okay. We have a way to do that now. Line styles, we worked a little bit on the dashed line patterns to make them at least scalable so that you can get a wider variety of patterns. We've added an angular dimension tool. How many? Yeah. People have been asking for angular dimensioning in SketchUp since Mark Carvalho. Mark Carvalho. Stand up and say hi, Mark. Mark predates me in a product design role on the SketchUp team. How long would you say we have heard requests for angular dimensioning? Day one. Okay. It took us a while. We're sorry. Anyway, there it is. And one last thing. Now that people are doing drawings like this, they want to get them out of layout. So they've asked that we do a CAD export. So we're able to do that now as well out of layout. And we can write to DWG, DXF 2010, and earlier formats as well. So that's Google SketchUp Pro 8. Modeling in context, those tools are available to all users, free and pro. Solid tools, some features available to free users, most of them just to pro. And then drafting and layout is exclusively for users of SketchUp Pro. And it's available today. But wait. Anybody here who uses SketchUp in a language other than English? Yeah. So there's probably a reason for that. It's taken us a really painfully long amount of time to get translations done for SketchUp in previous releases. So this time, and this is really the first time we've ever done this, we're releasing SketchUp 8 in English, French, Italian, German, and Spanish, simultaneous with the English release. It's all happening today. So if you want to use those builds, you're free to do so. And we have more languages to come. So thanks. I think maybe I went a little too long, and I'm ready to hand it over to my colleagues. So first, we're going to do Scott with a geomodeling demo. Scott? You all know Scott? Okay. Am I on? Hello?
So, I'm going to jump in here for 1 second. Can you make my mic hot, please? Mic number 1? Me too. And you need to be hot, too. Not that you're not already hot.
Thank you, Aiden.
I don't just mean because of this.
Number 4. There we go.
Right, number 4. So, has anybody tried dynamic components? Right? What was your reaction the first time you clicked on something and the door swung open or something? Was that a positive experience? Guess who wrote that functionality? That was Scott.
Great.
So,
So I've been on the SketchUp team for about 3 years now. I'm a software engineer. I am not an architect. But I play one in demos. Thank you. There. Is that better? Okay. So I'm just real quick going to show some of that geomodeling stuff that John talked about. But first, I wanted to just give a little bit of context of the challenge of the Google Earth sort of mirror world vision. It's something that I'm personally really excited about. How many of you remember the first time you saw Google Earth? Wasn't that just the most mind-blowing experience? I mean, I opened Google Earth for the first time and I was like, oh, so many things. You know, I felt like an astronaut. I was flying around in space, which is something I've always wanted to do. And I felt like an explorer. I could go anywhere on the planet and see things that I'd never seen before. And it really drove home to me how small this planet is. And I just think that the work that all of us are sort of collaborating on to build this mirror world is really important work. I really think that 100 years from now, people will look back at all the data that we're generating and gathering, and they will use it for archaeology. They will use it to have perspective on the human species. I mean, could you imagine being able to go back to see North America before Columbus and be able to slide that little slider and see how the landscape changes over time? That to me is really exciting stuff. And so the tools in SketchUp are definitely about providing users with the creative outlet to draw and build whatever they want. But there is a larger context there that I personally find exciting. And there are billions of buildings in this world. We don't really know how many there are. But right now, Google is generating thousands of buildings per week that are going into Google Earth, which is a lot of buildings that we're building with help of SketchUp users and Building Maker users and all kinds of automated processes. But at our current run rate, back a napkin calculation, I think it's going to take us about 3,000 years to model everything in the world. But if we could just get every one of SketchUp's 7-day active users, our million users, if we could get those people to just do one building a month, then all of a sudden it goes from thousands of years to generate the world to more like 5 years. If we could just get those people all motivated together, I'll stop doing that. So now that I've given you my little bit of sort of personal spiel for why I'm so excited about this stuff, I'm gonna draw a building. So let's say I'm an architect and I've got this fancy building that I want to put on a site in Denver. Oops, this is Bryce's model. Let me start a new model. Oops. There's Sue. So I've got my building, and the first feature that John talked about is add location. You click the add location button, it brings up a window right inside SketchUp, and I can do searches for things around Denver in this example. And when I click select region, it brings up the terrain selection tool. And by dragging these little blue pins, I can say where it is that I want to model. I click the grab button. We do a capture off of Google servers. And if I toggle my terrain, you can see the high resolution terrain. This is Cherry Creek in Denver. Pulling in, this hat is really hot. I mean, yeah. I happen to know that there's this parking lot here that I want to put my awesome building in. And I would very much like to get context. There's some big buildings around me, and I'd like to see how the shadows play and all that kind of stuff. And so this is where the new Building Maker tie-in becomes really handy. So there's this Add New Building button here. I pop this open. It brings up an embedded window inside SketchUp. Since I've already done add location, it knows where I am, and it locates me here. And the way Building Maker works is it shows me photographs, aerial photos of that location. So once I start building, generating a basic model is as easy as adding a primitive, dragging these little guys around to line it up with the imagery the best that I can. And it's pretty high quality. I can zoom in quite a bit of ways to get my model roughed out. And the important part about Building Maker is that you need to be sure to do it in several different images. So I can just click on any of these images that it's suggesting for me. And I can build myself a building maker model. That one looks pretty good. This one looks pretty good as well. So in this case, I've already started drawing a model of my own building, and so I can click on SketchUp Export. I'm going to call this building on Spear. And at this point, the 3D warehouse is generating a SketchUp model of the building that I just drew. This takes a few seconds to go. And then I can say either load it directly into my model or I can download the file. In this case, I do want to put it into my model. And you can see that easily I've added context. I also, as John noted, I can go to my component browser, and there is a nearby models search that's right here. So you just click here and you say nearby models, and this is where we do the search. So if I want to pull in Denver Police Headquarters, for example, whoops, I pushed the wrong button. This is just down the street. And you can see that I've pulled in this model that was done by somebody else, probably somebody I don't know. As more and more of the world gets built out by all of us, this process will become easier for all of us. Another thing that John mentioned that's been integrated since SketchUp 7.1 but now has its own icon on the Google bar is Street View imagery. So there's this kind of funky looking building here, this triangular building. And, whoops, oh, you know what I did? Is all the supermodelers are giggling at me. I had my terrain turned on, so I wasn't drawing planar lines. Do this again. This time it's going to work awesome. Something like this. I can push-pull this up. I'm going to say 12 feet. And then I can either click the little Street View guy, or I can right-click on any face in the model and say Add Photo Texture. This brings up the Street View integration. It finds the nearest location, and on my little map here, you'll see there's a green dot in the exact center of that face. Here's my little building that I'm drawing, just the tip of this sort of joined building. And very similar to add location, I just clicked Select Region. I drag my little pins around the 4 points of this guy here, and I say grab. And you can see that it applies that to whatever surface I had selected. So I can continue to refine. I'll add a little line right here, pull it down. And now I'm going to come back and I'm going to navigate over to the side of my building. Zoom in here. I can make this window much bigger to get a higher quality screen grab, but I'm just moving real quick. Select a region, grab, whoops, select one or more faces. I'll select that one. Select region, don't worry, it remembered where I was, grab, select region, grab. You get the idea. Once you become familiar with how these tools work, someone who knows SketchUp's basic push-pull kind of modeling paradigm can build out buildings quite quickly that are definitely of high enough quality to go into Google Earth and also high enough quality to be used for context modeling. So another place in downtown Denver that I really like is, I'm going to create a new file here. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the 3D warehouse. My warehouse, my models. And I want to just show you a little bit different workflow. So I imported it into my SketchUp model, which just showed me the geometry. But I also can click onto this building in Spear if my network connection will cooperate with me. Okay. Bear with me, I do have this file locally. Desktop. So here's that same model that I downloaded from the warehouse, and I have just opened it directly in SketchUp. The difference here is in addition to bringing in the geometry now, I also get match photo scenes for all of the oblique imagery that I used to build this model. And so for those of you who are familiar with match photo, I now can start going in directly and carving this guy up. So you'll notice that when I double click on my component, there are subcomponents that match the various boxes and primitives that I used in Building Maker. And the one solid tool that we do provide with SketchUp Free is the one called Outer Shell. And when I select all of my subgroups and say Outer Shell, it creates a single group with the geometry all merged together and none of the interior surfaces present. And so from here, I can just start using my familiar SketchUp tools to carve up this model. Okay. Now, you'll notice that this far face over here, what I would like to do is pull this back so that it lines up with my images because I wasn't really perfect about it. We've added a subtle change to the push-pull tool that allows you to do a pre-select push-pull. So I can orbit around to where I can see that face. I can click on it to select it, go back to scene 3, and now when I activate push-pull, it moves off of the one that was selected. So it's a really subtle thing, but as I've been personally geomodeling over the last few weeks with early builds of SketchUp, I personally have come to think that that's just how the push-pull tool always should have worked. It becomes really intuitive and helpful in more situations than I would have guessed. Couple other quick changes, and then I'll hand it off to our next presenter. Under my styles. This is something that is also a subtle difference, but is really helpful if you're working with Match Photo, is that under the Modeling tab, there are 2 sliders that allow you to change the opacity of the background photo and the sort of foreground photo. And so depending on what context you're working in, it can help you sort of isolate what it is that you're working on and not get confused about what you're clicking on. There's a few other things, but we can go into those in detail with any of the supermodelers who want to know. Oh yeah, thanks, Aiden. Also, navigationally, there's this new camera image igloo, which just brings up every one of the matched photos that are in your SketchUp drawing, and you can double click on them to zoom into that tab. What? Anything else that I forgot? And so that's the geomodeling stuff. I'd love to give more in-depth demos to anybody who wants to know later in the conference. Thanks, guys.
Is this thing live? Oh, okay. Thanks, Scott. Scott's also being a little bit modest because Scott wrote a lot of what you just saw. Along with, who else here has worked on that? Mike Goss, are you here? Mike's here in the back. Worked on all kinds of crazy stuff. Yep. Mike worked on all the stuff under the hood so that now if you grab one picture and another one next to it, they match. Awesome. Not easy, also. So, great. Bryce, I'd like to introduce Bryce Staub. Everybody knows Bryce.
Hi, everyone.
Bryce, you are employee number what?
Like
5.
8. No.
8. Yeah. Okay. There's nothing Bryce doesn't know about SketchUp, and he will demonstrate the solid tools. Solid tools.
So, let me clean up here, and I'll kind of segue into the solid tools. So every time, we've had a release probably for the last, I don't know, like 3, 4, 5, 6 years. We work really hard, and we give it out to the beta community, and everyone's like, yeah, that's really cool. You guys did great, but where are the Boolean tools? And so that's what I'm going to demo today. So, and if it's not obvious, we really didn't rehearse this thing, so I didn't realize that John actually went over kind of the details of the solid tools. So
go for it.
I'll just show the cool stuff here. So let me get started. This was my file. Let's revert it. Da-da-da. yes, I would like to revert. And then I need my entity info, and I'm going to use my styles as well here. So let's stick these guys together. Okay, so solid tools. I mean, one of the beautiful things about SketchUp is it's not a solid modeler. It's a faceted modeler. So you can move edges around, you can stretch things stick together. That was really what was the beautiful thing about SketchUp in the early days. And people, I think, embraced that, but they also wanted to take it further. So for these complex modeling operations that products like FormZ and Maya do, like you need these Boolean operations where you subtract this object from that object, connect this to that, and so that's what we've done here. So, but we also have maintained kind of the ease and beauty of SketchUp. So let's pull up a group here, or sorry, a box. But we built the solids structure, I guess, on top of groups and components. So you have to have, as John was showing earlier, you have to have a watertight object, and that basically defines a solid. So I'm going to make a group here. It's watertight, I know that because I pushed it up, but in many cases, like there's funky geometry and things that make groups not solid. So I'm going to kind of go over those limitations here real quick, and then we'll show some of the coolest examples I could come up with yesterday. So you can see the volume here is roughly 434 cubic feet. Great for calculating various things for like energy calculation and 3D printing. So again, a watertight shape, and we allow kind of groups of these watertight shapes. So if you actually have, say, 2 watertight shapes nested inside of a group, that actually also qualifies as a solid. So let's group both of these together. Let's try again. Make group and thank you. Sorry. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Make group. Yay! Here we go. Okay, so solid group. Awesome. So so as John showed earlier, we've got your standard intersect, union, subtract, and then we have trim and split, which are probably the most powerful 2 tools. So I'll show kind of just the basics. Actually, John already showed those. I was going to show some examples. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me actually show you what won't work. So let's back up here. So non-watertight shapes don't work. So this is an example. Let's actually just delete the face. Non-watertight shape, not going to work. Stray geometry, so stray edges and stray faces will also not work. So we'll pull this up, and oftentimes when you're creating these shapes, you'll get like these little lines, segments that kind of just stick out here, and you can see that it's thick. It's a profile. So if I select this and say make group, no can do. It's not solid. But if you come in here and erase this, it'll be solid. And similarly, if you use like the offset tool, or if you have a collinear edge that subdivides a face, that actually qualifies as a solid. So let's select it. Again, we're still solid. So stray faces also happens all the time with SketchUp. So if you push up a box here, and then you connect another box to it, take the push-pull tool. If you're not new to SketchUp, you know there's a face in between here, and it's actually defined by this edge, and you can kind of see the white peeking through. You need to delete those faces, otherwise the solid tools won't work. So I'll just quickly reiterate the basics and then get into my sort of cooler examples. So these spheres, let's do a intersect command. And intersect does not rely on the order of operation. You basically can select the tool, select the first object, select the second object, bam. SketchUp actually flips the faces inside out so that the front face is outward, and you've got your little overlapping section. One thing actually Scott didn't talk about, and I'm glad because it gives me more to talk about, is a new display style, which we created both for the solid stuff and for the geomodeling stuff, and that's called back edges. And you guys might have noticed it, but it's basically like X-ray, but it's essentially, it looks great in hidden line mode, just the dashed back edges. Like, I love that from architecture school, and we finally got it in SketchUp. So let's deselect, and we're going to union these two spheres. So 1, 2, boom, you can see they now share an edge, so that's union. Subtract goes either way, and it's kind of a language thing. So in order to figure out how the tools work, we came up with this thing, and it's Aiden's signature statement about solid tools. It's
Use this to cut that.
use this to cut that. So we're going to do that right now. Let's pick subtract, and we're going to use this sphere to cut this box. We are going to use that box to cut this sphere. So, and those are both destructive operations, we call it. So one object goes away, or you're left with one object. So that's useful a lot of the times, but if you're used to working with the intersect with model command, what I would personally do is I would take my collection of objects and I would copy them for each object, and I would go intersect with model, intersect with model, intersect with model, and then I would start the erasing. And so you no longer have to do that. We've come up with split and trim, just your standard Boolean operations, but they will save you tons of time. So split basically takes two objects and splits them into three. You're left with the intersection and then the leftovers. So I split here. My eyes are going 1, 2, and you can see all the geometry appear, and then we'll just move them apart. And that is the split. And then trim is by far the most useful tool, and it's basically use this to cut that, but it keeps this. So you're basically imprinting one object on another, and it leaves the void there. And don't clap yet. Don't clap yet. It gets better. So trim works with multiple objects, so I'm actually going to use this funky shape to trim these, let's start over, to trim these boards. So we'll click trim, object number 1, board number 1, board number 2, board number 3, board number 4. So, and if you're curious how this works, these were all components before. And basically what we do is if you do a solid operation on a component, we realize that you may have other copies of it and whatnot, and we don't want to mess that up. So we just convert everything to groups. So after you're doing this, it's more of like a working phase. So you'll basically have to, let's go back, and this is now a solid group. It was a component board before, and it's just named difference. So if you want to actually use it further in your model and you're going to copy it, make sure that you create a component of it. So let's look at a couple more complicated examples. Where's my stuff? So Scott talked a little bit about outer shell, and the outer shell is basically like union, but kind of not really. Sort of. They're the same, but there's a subtle difference here. So, and one thing about these solid tools is I've actually been working on the 3D Warehouse and Building Maker the last probably 6 months, and I haven't been playing with SketchUp as much as I normally have. And in coming up with this demo, I kind of just realized these subtle things about the solid tools where they've changed my modeling habits. Like before, I would have to pull a face and do a lot of erasing, and now you can just join stuff together. It's actually pretty remarkable when you want to do something that was previously hard to do. So, and I guess an example of that would be adding a foundation on a building like this. Before it was tedious, now it's actually really easy to do. So let me get the move tool. I'm going to join these together, and again, the back edges makes it super easy to do in this view. And we're going to make 2 copies of this. So we'll copy this off to the side. And while this is selected, we're just going to outer shell this, and you can see there were rooms and everything inside. It's no surprise when I hit outer shell, you were just shrink wrapping the model, everything goes away. But union actually keeps these voids inside. So we're going to come over here, click union, and it didn't really do a lot, but what it did was it actually made a solid object. There's actually voids inside this. So let's look at the section tool. There we go, section planar. Did you guys move it in SketchUp 8? So the cool thing here is that notice the walls are actually joined up with the roof. And so again, just a quick way to union objects. So I'm sure you guys will come up with lots of uses for that. Let's look at split. I had a really hard time coming up with a good example for split, but it's a super useful tool to use with other tools. So this is 2 cylinders, and I had a heck of a time getting this to work this morning. I don't know why, but we're going to go ahead and try and select them. We're going to go ahead and split them, and again, we're ending up with 3 objects, the intersection, and then the 2 leftover objects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue working. So I want to make a pipe elbow out of this whole setup. So I'm going to delete the ends of these guys. And let's select them. That's a solid group, solid group, solid group. And then I'm going to quickly union them together. And so split is really nice for doing those kinds of things. Saves you a ton of time. So next, let's look at trim. Trim's my favorite. Table trim. Let's open it up. So this is, I'm sure many of you are woodworkers, and this is kind of I'm not a true woodworker, I'm more of a metal worker, but this is kind of the most complicated wood joint I could kind of come up with quickly. But if I click on these, you can kind of see that they're not intersected yet, right? And previously you'd have to go in, and we have these different display modes, so you trace over one, or you can use intersect with model and it lands in the wrong context, or it's really complicated. So again, we're going to use use this to cut that, so the whole trim thing. So I'm going to trim, and first I'm going to select this cross piece and select the table leg. On select, and I'll do it with the other one. So we'll select this cross piece, click on the table leg, and let me show you what it did. Actually pierced 2 holes in it. So we got 2 more joints. This one actually cuts this one. So let's use this to cut that. And then one more. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. One more. We're actually going to use the pin to cut this. And the result is, let's pull that out, move that over, like 8 clicks. So. And then I've just got one last example. I hope it works. This is the Girdlesher Boolean. It's totally going to work. So SU8, it works definitely the second or third time if it doesn't work. So we're just going to intersect all 3 of these. These are actually from SketchUp's 3D text tool. And what I did was I scaled everything so that like the U is as tall as the S and the 8 is as wide as the S. And so they're kind of close together, which is why the tolerances sometimes mess up. But let's have some faith. I'm going to click intersect. We're going to wait like 2 seconds. And now, let's try it again. No.
It should say FU2.
This is a complicated operation. That's why it's, there we go. So, so hang on. This is the SU8, and so we have the S. Got the U on the side, and then the 8 from the top. So, so that's it for the solid tools. Who are we handing it over to? Aiden?
Next up, Aiden is going to talk about what's new in layout. What's new in layout.
All right, big hand for Bryce on that one. I have to congratulate. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Do we have David here? Is David here?
Is David McNair here?
He's sick today.
He's sick today. All right, so.
David wrote that.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
What I wanted to do was congratulate Bryce and Scott on those presentations. So I'm sort of a dancing monkey. I wear stupid hats and speak loudly. It's what I get paid not enough to do. And these guys are actually useful people. They build products, they write code, they make sure things work. So big hand for their presentations because that's not what they do. Can we see again who are the layout users in the room? Fantastic. Who's not a layout user? Okay, we're going to need some money from all of you. Yeah, you can just leave it on the desk outside. The point is that slowly, like kind of very slowly, we've been making layout better and better and better. And John alluded to it a little bit with that document that he showed as part of his presentation, right? It was, as far as we're concerned, a pretty advanced construction document set for a house. And when John, at least, and Joe conceived of layout several years ago, it was, people will take this through design document phase maybe, right? Maybe some dimensioning, but this is what's going to get you before AutoCAD or Vectorworks or whatever you use. You don't have to use this for that other stuff. We're trying to fill gaps in the software universe here. And now all of a sudden people are using layout instead of some of those apps. And so we've started to make some applications that make it a little bit easier to do so. I'm just going to close SketchUp altogether. And then I'm going to open it again, and that was a fast way of closing everything. Uh-oh. Where's my SketchUps? What is this? All right. Is this SketchUp 8? Dum, dum, dum. It's a really unfriendly thing to do, to go flying through your friend's hard drive in front of a big crowd. You say, oh, I didn't know you were into that. Okay, this is... Is that my wife? Okay, this is... I'm just going to close this. Let's close this for a second. I'm going to open a document I made. This is, it's probably overhashed, but it works for me. So I'm going to show it again. How many people are familiar with the Case Study House program? Architecture people? Yeah, the case study, well, we're not responsible for it. It was several years before I was born. In the 40s, I think John was just a little kid. And this was actually Case Study House 1, which is why I use it so much. It's iconic architecture. This is an important example of California modernism residential architecture. What I want to do is, I've got this building right here, and I want to make just a very simple 24 by 36 inch sheet. I want to show a plan of it at scale, and I want to show an elevation at a different scale. I want to put them both on the same sheet. So, what's the first thing I need to do if I want to make some views of this thing? How do I save views in SketchUp of this model in a particular way? What do I use? Scenes. Okay, so let's make a couple scenes. First thing I have to do is aim my camera right. So let's go front view, and let's just turn off perspective on that. I think I'd like some delicious shadows on this, please. So we notice we changed the shadows dialog box for 8 as well. We have an actual little icon instead of a little yes or no checkbox. And there's actually a little adjustment for your time zone as well. So even if by geolocating your model, it doesn't know exactly what time it is, you can kind of fine-tune things with that drop-down menu. Big improvement as far as a lot of people are concerned. Let's turn on some shadows. That's quite nice. All right, so I need to save a scene of this thing. Oh, new feature. Look right there. What do you see? Thumbnails, exactly. Scene thumbnails right here. Check it out. I'm going to make a new scene. Click. And I'm going to say, I would like this scene to be called, can I just double click it right there? No, I think I need to go to, oh, I'm sorry. I need to open this, right. And then I can rename this elevation right there. And what I'm actually getting is little scene thumbnails for each of the scenes in the model. Another huge feature request, a really nice way. How many people have ever made a model with more than 10 scenes? Right. How many people, so this is going to help you? Yes. Excellent, good. All right. So we've got that scene made. Let's make another something right now. I'll turn off my shadows. Turn off shadows. I would like to be looking at a top view this time, except not exactly. How do I cut through this so that I can actually see a plan view here in the model? A section plane, right? So let's grab the section. I'm doing this, I'm sorry to be patronizing, but there are people who are self-identified non-SketchUp experts. So rather than just booting them out, we thought we would actually bring them up to speed. Let's just set that section plane down right there. And so I've got this nice little section right here in my model. You can see I filled this delicious example of mid-century modernism with mid-century modern furniture that I can't have. I live vicariously through Dwell Magazine by using SketchUp and downloading cool stuff from Form Fonts in the 3D warehouse to support it. Okay, so I want that. I'm going to set up my little top view here. I don't like the fact that I can see that section plane thing that was showing up over here. Let's create a new scene. Here we go, new scene, doom, like that. Let's call this plan right there. And now what I've got is a SketchUp model that includes scenes for an overall view of the house, an elevation view of the house, and a plan view of the house. Is that new to anybody? Hands up if that was new to you. Excellent. So this is a very advanced crowd. Okay. What might be new to you actually is knowing that this is the best way to proceed into layout now. So if you're using layout, you should absolutely make scenes that correspond to the views you're going to want to show in layout before you go in there. Does that make sense? A lot of people make the mistake of not doing that, and then you're fiddling around and you're orbiting, you can't get back to the view you want in the toilet, and then that's it. So this is what you need to do. What's the next thing I need to do? I have a SketchUp model, I've made changes, computers are bad. Save. Okay, so we're going to save that model. Good. Save the model. Excellent. And I want to send this over to layout. So I'm just going to go over here. Let's go to send to layout. It's going to launch layout. I think I would like to put this on maybe a modern title block. Let's choose ArchD Landscape and choose. And what it's going to do is actually drop that SketchUp model directly onto my page for me, just like that. It's actually chose the scene to show, or the view of the model that was showing the last time I saved the SketchUp model. So even though in SketchUp I'm looking at this view of the model, the last time I saved it, I was looking at this view of the model, which is confusing for some people sometimes, so that's why I'm telling you. That's right there. Okay, we have this SketchUp model dialog box right here, and I can actually choose the scenes that I set up right here on this dialog. So let's say I would like to put a plan here. So instead of just taking the last saved view of my thing, I actually want to be very precise about this. I want to say I want to save a plan. I want the top. Let's actually assign a scale to this thing. Let's do 1/8 inch scale because I know it sits nicely on this page. One of the things we do in Layout 3 now is we automatically switch you from this preserve scale on resize no. As soon as you choose a scale, we turn that on to save you a step so that when you start moving this thing, it doesn't rescale the thing and mess you all up again. Does that happen to you? Yes. Okay, so we fixed that. Let's come over here. And I'm just going to kind of throw this guy up here. Why are you moving? Okay, good. It's moving right here. Now, I want to throw that elevation maybe at a bigger scale down below this plan. So let's just take that, copy this right over here. How do I change the scene that's assigned to this particular viewport? In the SketchUp model dialog box right here, I'm going to say I would like to be looking at elevation. It's going to re-render it, just like that. And I need a scale for that too. Let's do this one at 1/4 inch because I've got the width on the page. I may not have the detail in the model, but I have the width on the page. Okay, let's widen this thing a little bit. All right, so herein lies the problem. Let's see, I went to architecture school for a long time, so I learned that there are very few crimes that you can commit. It's okay to stay up all night. It's okay to go to the bathroom behind your desk if you're on deadline. It's okay to drink heavily before a presentation if you can pull it off. There's lots of things that are okay. What's not okay is putting a drawing on the page like this. Look at this. Oh my goodness. The people, designers, look at that and their insides shrivel up and part of them dies. And Mies starts rolling in his grave. So what we need to do is we need to roll this over here. But before, in layout, the really big pain in the butt was if I wanted to snap this thing here to this, I'm not getting a snap point, right? I'm getting a snap point over here on the corner of the box that bounds the model, but I'm not getting a snap point. So how do I line that edge up with the other edge? What's the new feature that lets us do that? Precise move, exactly. So how do I do it? I'm just going to come in here, I'm going to grab this little center point, I'm going to put it where I want it to be. And now I've got a custom snap point that I can just throw right there. And now I'll just use the arrow keys to put that exactly where I want it. Is that useful to you? Excellent, good. Okay, next little thing, let's talk about dimensioning. So one of the things we've been able to do, here's something. Look how bad that looks, yuck. Why does that look like that? This is vector stuff, right? It's vectors in SketchUp. layouts vectors, why does this look like such poop? Because it's raster rendered, exactly. So the control for changing that, if you don't like how that looks, is right here. I'm going to select the model, and then I'm going to change right here in the SketchUp model dialog box from raster to vector. It's going to think for a few moments, and then boom, there you go. It's a vector rendering. So this is actually something that we introduced in SketchUp 2, I think, right? SketchUp 2 or 2.1? 2, right. So we've had that around for a while. But you'd be amazed how many people just don't find this stuff when we release it. Anyhow, it looks good right now. What I'd like to do is maybe add a little angular dimension up here. We've always been able to do these linear dimension things, at least since last October. Let's just kind of throw this dimension on here. Let's kind of snap to there and pull that out. So that already kind of groundbreaking for people, and they were excited about it. Let's change this to architectural and change the precision up to something that's more reasonable for a house. There we go. I want to do an angular dimension right in here, so let's just take this thing and say, instead of doing linear, I want to do angular. The angular dimension tool is actually, it has to be a lot more complicated than you'd think it would be, right? You'd think you just sort of click on two lines and it figures it out. But think of how many different examples of things at angles there are to each other, right? You can have two objects that are at funny angles. You can have inside angles, outside angles. So Preston, is Preston here? Preston's right there. Big hand for Preston. Preston is the lead developer on layout, as it happens. Actually, a big hand for the rest of the layout development team. Are they up there too? Anybody? Paul, Jeff, Preston, those folks? Thank you. He programmed this, so it's not, it's not like the first way you would think it would work, but it works, and it always works exactly the way you need it to work for every situation. Here's how it goes. The first click you put down defines one point on a line that you want to dimension. The second point defines the rest of that line. So you see that blue dotted line? That's showing us the first direction for the angle. And then we're going to do it again. We're going to click here and then here, and look what I've got. So what I've got is an angular dimension that's pulling out exactly here. And not only that, if I say, you know what, I didn't want the inside angle, we can do outside angles too. So 5 clicks. Here's the 5th click, just like that. And once I've got that, it's easy. Just like everything else, if I find the dimension style dialog box right here, I'm going to say I'd like that maybe to be in the middle of my dimension. I would like this to be in, let's see, I would like to have little arrows on the end of there, please. So let's kind of scale that down. And we've got that just like that. And I think maybe I'll dimension this corner over here too. So I'm going to go up here and get the dimension tool. And let's do the same thing. So we're going to go inside corner, 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 and bring that out. And bummer, right? It didn't do what I wanted it to do because it doesn't look like the other dimension does. What's the little keyboard shortcut I can press to make this one look just like the other one? Watch this. S, exactly. So I'm going to activate the tool. And then I'm going to hit S on my keyboard, which gives me this little, what's that called, an eyedropper? It's an eyedropper, little sample tool. I'm going to sample the dimension whose style I want to match. And now any dimension I make after that is automatically going to have that style. Not something that's new in 8, but something that a lot of people didn't understand. And I messed that up somehow. But let's pretend that that angle is important to you. Excellent. All right. I'm designing this amazing bench, and it's going to sit outside my property for my neighbors, and it has to be exactly that angle, so we'll put it right there. It'll be just fine. So that's angular dimensions. Whoa. It's like I'm possessed, and everyone's finding out. Ah, here's my sticky. All right. Next thing I want to show you, dashed lines. Another nice little trick for doing this. Let's move this back over here. Kind of make this a little smaller. In my experience, whenever I'm drawing on a placed little model like this, what I really like to do is make that its own layer and then lock that layer and start drawing on another layer. Familiar to people? You get lazy and you don't do it, and then you've got all your dimensions in and you're all on one layer, and somebody calls and wants to change something, and then again in the toilet. So what you need to do is just take the time, make a new layer, call this, I don't know, dashed lines. Here we go. Let's lock that other layer, and now I'm actually drawing on this one. What I'd like to do is create some overhang lines. This is the second story of this building, right? I need to have I'm cut through the first story. I want a roof view so that I can see where the overhangs are so I can put some dashed lines in. My favorite way to do that in layout is actually to take this model view, if I can pick it. Can I lock everything? Here we go. So I've got that. I'm going to duplicate it. Let's just pull the copy over here a little ways. Good. Oh, I didn't duplicate it. Let's come over here, just like that. Good. All right, now I'm going to change the scene I have actually assigned to this thing so that I don't have a section cut activated anymore. All right, and let's make that a top view, and let's match its scale. This thing's taking a little longer to render right now. Why? Why is it taking longer to render than it did when I first brought this in? Because it's vector rendered, exactly. If I want to speed up the performance a little bit, I can say make this raster rendered instead, and it speeds up the performance just a little bit. I would like to have this at a particular scale. Let's match the scale of the other drawing. Now, I want to make these guys overlap, right? I want this thing to sit where this thing is. What new feature can I use to make this fit exactly where that is? Precise move again, right? So I'm going to go this. What I actually heard in that case, by the way, was, so your energy is terrible right now. No cheers for you. Let's do this. I'm going to move this over to here, and then let's just kind of put this, boom, boom, knock the whole podium over. And now they're actually overlapped, which is very nice. Let's go back over here to my layers. I want to be drawing on dashed lines. And I think what I'll do is I'll just trace this little overlappy guy here. Dunk. Again, we can see through layout into the SketchUp model because of some stuff we introduced in SketchUp 7.1, like that. And I'm going to make that line red just so that we can see it a little bit better. Here we go. Okay. And let's get rid of the roof plan view because we don't need it anymore. And what I need is a dashed line for here. So how do I make a dashed line in layout? I would just pick from this little menu, right? And before, oh, you can't really see the menu, can you? Let's move it over here. I pick from this little menu, and it was kind of a bummer, right? Because there was like 10 styles. And you're like, there's so many beautiful lines in the world, and you give me 10? 10 lines? My whole life is lines, and we only give you 10. So what we've done is we've added a little control to here to let you customize it just a little bit. So here, I'm going to pick this dashed line because I'm boring. But you can get really fancy. I don't know who, does anybody know what dash, dash, dot, 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 dash, dash, dot, dot, dot is for? I mean, unless, aside from Morse code people. What's that? SOS, exactly. So the architect is being held captive by a terrorist and wants to send a signal to the engineer to say, this isn't an actual drawing. Yeah. So I'm going to dispense with that line style. Let's just do dashes instead. The nice thing here, though, is I have this little control. This is brand new. I'm just going to zoom in on it right there. It's called dashes scale. And if I make the scale a little bit smaller, notice I'm actually changing the scale of the dashes. We made it easy for you. We automatically scale the space between the dashes proportionally, so you don't have 15 different sliders and stuff to work with. But all you have to do is kind of click this little thing or even pick something from this menu to figure out exactly how big that dash pattern should be. And that's exactly how that works. Okay. Last thing, of course, is very unsexy because everybody knows how great a demo exporting is, especially exporting to AutoCAD. So let's do this. File, export. You'll notice that right here in Layout 3 as part of SketchUp Pro 8, we have DWG, DXF, and options. And we actually give you the option to go to either paper space or model space with the scale, which is kind of nice. So if you're a CAD user and you want to make layout a part of your CAD workflow, do some of your work here, generate a CAD file and give it to somebody else that you have to share files with. They're like, I don't use layout. You can't use layout either. You can be like, I can use layout. Here's a CAD file for you, you old-fashioned Luddite. So that's how it works. Right. So that's exactly how you can do that. All right. What we're going to do now, that's the new features in layout. And let's have a big hand. All the people, including John, please, who worked on layout, and the layout developers who are here, give them a big hand.
And for that matter, actually, let's have the people who worked on all the other SketchUp features that we just looked at, let's have them stand up for a second. All of you who are here. Is John here?
Wake up.
John here. Susan. Tyler. Wave Tyler. Okay. These guys have been working super hard, and they're very tired. So
when you think about Google, right, you think, that's a big company, and they have all these thousands of employees, and Google makes SketchUp, and SketchUp must have access to those people. But what you just saw is the people who make SketchUp stand up, and there aren't that many people really who work on this. So you can imagine how much incredible hard work goes into building the stuff that you've just seen. So thank you very much.